We're going to play a game, and this game begins at McMurdo's Sound, which is a little lake. Now, what I want you guys to do is find the highest point. So give me a distance, some number of miles away from McMurdo Sound, between 0 and like 35. Hannah, if you want, you can have the first guess.
Oh, go on then. 8.
Right, so let's go. Oh, there we go. We've found a little bit of lake.
22.
22.
22.
Right.
Feeling good about 22.
Oh, you've actually smashed straight onto one of the peaks. Anyone have any other mileages away that they want to guess? There are a few peaks hidden in this Canadian land. No peak at 27. Paul's giving us a 30. Let's have a little look at 30. Just got a bit of a lake there at 30. Hannah?
I'm going to say 3.
3?
Yeah.
Boom, Coral Ridge. So the point is that when you know little bits of the map, you can start to guess where the peaks are going to be. This is essentially, in some ways, how a computer will like figure out a problem. In some ways, it'll like make a guess, and then it'll use that guess to figure out, okay, which direction do I need to go in next? If we knew that we could see this bit and we could see this bit, then where would you guess, Hannah?
In the middle of it.
But yeah, so in a simple sense, like computers kind of see bits of patterns and they're like, okay, I guess that it's going to be somewhere in the middle. Okay, let's play this challenge again, but this time I've changed the map a bit. So I've got rid of McMurdo Sound, but let's have some of the other guesses. Hannah, go on, give us a couple to start with.
15.
Right, 15. There you go.
Let's have another 3.
Right, there you go.
There's nothing there.
Exactly. There's no clues in the landscape as to where the peaks are, but if you keep looking, then eventually you'll find them. This is something that a computer can't really look around for clues to try and solve because the solutions don't have any clues. So if a computer guesses, oh, maybe it's going to be at 10, then it can't see, oh, it's kind of uphill in that direction or uphill in that direction. It's got no clues, right? So if you guess here and you don't know that these peaks are either side of you, then which way do you go? You don't know, right? And this is a bit of a cartoon, but this is kind of called like a hash function. So what this is a really, really difficult problem for a computer to solve. But the computer tries to solve this problem just by essentially by making loads and loads of guesses. It just makes endless guesses to try and solve the problem. Now, you might be wondering why we started with this, but the reason why is that kind of Bitcoins or cryptocurrencies are like the solutions to this problem. Bitcoin, for example, is like one big hash function problem. It's a big hash function that we've all got to solve. And if you solve it and you get an answer, then you essentially like own a Bitcoin. Hannah, why can't we just steal someone else's Bitcoin? Why can't we just like take their answer?
Oh, I think I might know this. Is it something to do with like a bit like end-to-end encryption?
Not really, actually. You don't. This is the really clever thing about cryptocurrency. You don't need that kind of like clever kind of encryption to make sure that nobody else gets hold of the answer. The thing is, I could know that the answer to the problem is 30, but at the same time, no one would believe me that I own this answer because everyone knows that Hannah owns this answer. Okay. So there's some way that everyone knows that you own the answer and they don't know that I own it.
I'm just, my initial question, I don't know if anyone else has.
Yeah.
Is there a set amount of Bitcoin that can ever be made? And therefore you just got to go away and find it?
So the hash function will have like a predefined number of solutions. You're right. Mm-hmm. So the hash function is basically like a super complicated equation that's got loads and loads of possible solutions. And we can just see here, there's a solution at 2, one at 15, and one at 30. Right? This is where the answers are. When the Bitcoin like original function was invented, there were loads and loads of solutions, but it's a fixed number of solutions. So you're right. Like eventually, we will get to a point where you can't come up with any more solutions. Well,
right.
Kind of. Basically, like Bitcoin is like a big maths problem, and it has loads and loads of answers, and each answer is kind of like a Bitcoin in itself. And people are out there mining their Bitcoin, and to mine the Bitcoin, they're just like trying to find answers to the problem.
That's where the miners come in. This is what the miners are doing. The miners are trying to come up with solutions to the hash function. The problem.
Exactly. Yeah.
Got it. Okay, I'm there. Who else is there? Everyone following?
Do you know what an olm is?
Oh, it hasn't got any eyes. That's all I know about it.
Anyway, we're going to use this olm to explain something called the blockchain, but here I've added an umlaut to make it blockchain. Let's say that the olm's head is the beginning of like this new cryptocurrency that we've just created. right at the beginning, the first thing happens is that Hannah finds a Bitcoin solution. And let's say she's got the one that was like the answer of 30 or whatever it was.
Nice.
Next, I'm going to get one. What happens next is I then give my coin to Hannah. Give 22 to Hannah. So now you've got 2 coins and I've got nothing, right? Right. But the point is that all these transactions are going down in sequence, one after the other. And this is called like a blockchain. It's like a chain of transactions happening one after the other. If you ran this system, Hannah, like if you're the only person who runs this system, how could you change the records to your own favor? Let's add another thing going on here. So let's say that later on, Paul finds another solution to the problem with his computer that's mining away, trying to find answers. So what I'm thinking is you could just go in and you could just like scribble out Paul's name.
Oh.
And on top of Paul's name, you could just write Hannah instead. And then you own that coin as well. And nobody knows because you're in charge of like setting all the records, right? So you've got the book. You've got the book somewhere, and you're just writing down all the transactions.
Okay, big dusty book, writing down the transactions. Got it. Okay.
Yeah. And so then anyone comes to look at the book, and they're like, "Oh, Hannah owns all of them." In like a normal banking system, like in theory, a bank can do this, right? They can just like change a transaction at some stage, and no one would know if they did it secretly enough. The difference with this system is that with cryptocurrencies, it's not just that there's like one record on the internet that keeps track of all of these transactions that are all happening in this chain. The reality is that every single person who is using Bitcoins has a record of this transaction.
Really?
Yeah.
Just by owning Bitcoin, you are also contributing to the storage of data about all of the Bitcoin.
Yeah, exactly. Cool.
Much.
Let's say that Paul like was trying to fake something and he got in here and he was like, oh, I don't want Matt to have this 22. So he just like scribbles it out. The only place where this has changed is on his own record. And then you've got a million other people in the world who are like, no, it's not the same as my record.
Then the value of it doesn't count because they're like, that's a fake, it's a fake coin.
Yeah, exactly. So because every single person in the world has got a copy of like all the transactions that have ever happened, one after the other in this chain of transactions, you can't change any past transaction.
Crazy.
That's why you can't like fraudulently take money away from someone with Bitcoin. And that's why it's highly secure in that sense. This is why a lot of people like it. This is called the distributed ledger. And I'm just going to go to this slide. Do you recognize this? I thought this was one of those things that everyone knew about, but then I found it really hard to find a picture of one. The thing with the receipt spike, it's a pretty old thing, but what you do is like you get a receipt, you put it on the spike, and then you put the next one on the spike and so on, and you know exactly the order that all the receipts got picked up in because the bottom one is the oldest one and so on. And this is like really, really similar to the blockchain. So every transaction that ever happens just stacks on top of one another like this in a record that just keeps stacking. And every time someone discovers a Bitcoin or makes a new transaction, it gets recorded on this like increasing spike up and up and up. Now let's talk about different kinds of coins, right? Yes. So you've got Bitcoin and Ethereum are the two that most people have heard about. So Bitcoin is the really famous one. It was the first one. And then Ethereum is the other really big one that people talk about. And in some ways, people have started likening these to being kind of like digital gold and digital silver, but it's more complicated than that because Ethereum's way cleverer than Bitcoin, but it's just that Bitcoin got there first. And so Bitcoin's kind of the big one and Ethereum tends to lag behind it. Anyway, we won't talk about this now, but let's just talk about these three as just examples of what goes on because there are loads of cryptocurrencies. Does anyone know what the point of Dash is?
Might be like a cleaning product.
It's to do with the fact that a Bitcoin transaction takes a really, really long time. And that's because there's loads of computing that needs to be done to program the whole ledger, because you've now got to look at this huge chain of transactions in the past and verify that it's the same for every single person. And then finally, when everyone's agreed, everyone's got exactly the same records, right, fine, this Bitcoin can go through because everyone agrees. Monero is one that's like really interesting. Monero is the one that a lot of criminals really like because one of the things we didn't talk about before is that when you trade Bitcoins around, you don't trade them between like a wallet that says Hannah Lewis on it and Matthew Shribman. You trade it between like an anonymous wallet with a code on. Nowadays, people can start to track Bitcoin transactions, but still like it's kind of a little bit anonymous. But Monero is really, really anonymous. But let's say I want to give you some money, but I don't want anyone to know about it. What I would do is I would get together with like 10,000 other people who all want to make transactions. And then what we all do is everyone who wants to give money just throws it into a pot in the middle. And then everyone who needs to take the right amount of money takes it from the pots. But there's like a control to make sure you only get what you were supposed to receive. But then who's to say who you receive that money from, Hannah? You know,
it's like a big like whirlpool of money.
Yeah, Dogecoin's just entirely based on a meme.
It's not from the Doge meme.
It is, yeah. So our monetary system at the moment is what's called a fiat monetary system. Does anyone know what that means? What does fiat mean?
If anyone's got any car knowledge, you might know what Matthew's talking about, whereas I am more of a two-wheel kind of gal.
It's nothing to do with cars. Okay, so fiat, what does fiat mean? I'm not very good at languages, but doesn't fiat mean something to do with the word free? It doesn't mean that the money is free, but it means that it's not based on anything. It's just entirely fictional. So the money isn't linked to any intrinsic value. If you offered to give me a pound coin, I'd be like, great, cool, I can spend this. But it's not really linked to anything, right? The only reason it has any value is because we both trust that it has some value, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's say you go into a bank and you want a loan. So I'm going to be the bank. Hannah, ask me for a loan.
Thank you. Please, may I have some money? I will give it to you back sometime soon, very soon.
Right. How much do you want?
£100, please.
Great. Here's £100. Okay, so where did that £100 that I just gave you come from?
From the safe in the bank.
No.
I don't know. From the...
Does anyone in the chat know where that money came from?
Nowhere.
Yeah. No. LVR, TCKR, and Sarah both spot on. Great answers, both of you. Yeah, it just comes from nowhere. So the bank just types the money into the computer and suddenly the money exists. And the only reason the money exists is because what gives it value is that you are going to pay it back. That's the only thing that gives it value. But before then, it didn't exist. It wasn't that they took it from someone else's account or took it from their pot of savings or took it from the back of the bank. They just made it up because you wanted it. So if every single debt in US dollars around the world were to be paid off tomorrow, all of the US dollars in the world would cease to exist. There'd be none left. And there'd not only be none left, but actually it would be physically impossible to pay them all off before none existed anymore.
Why? How?
Because every single dollar in existence is based on a debt. Every dollar in existence is based on someone owing someone else some money. So as soon as the debt is paid off to the final person in the chain, it doesn't exist anymore, because eventually when it gets back to like a bank that essentially kind of invented the money in the first place, it's gone.
That is absolutely mad. So is that why there's an argument to say that you could literally just print as much money, like the Bank of England could just print as much money as we needed to solve the issues we need to solve? Because like you say, money has just come from thin air. So
there's something that you might have heard in the news called quantitative easing. And it sounds really boring, and it's almost like it's designed to sound boring on purpose, but it is like the defining thing of our era. It's completely transforming the world, and it's just quietly happening in the background and completely turning everything into a completely different planet. But quantitative easing is essentially this process where central banks just create money out of nowhere, and then they use it to buy things. And they use it to buy shares in companies. So they're like, okay, I'll have a little bit of Apple, a little bit of Tesla, a little bit of Microsoft, and they just buy all these shares in the companies. Now, what happens to the value of the shares when this happens?
They go up.
They go up because there's more buying, buying, more demand, so they go up. Now, who does this benefit the most? The main answer is rich people, right? Because rich people are the people who buy stocks. Like it's only people who have quite a lot of money who are like, right, I've bought all the things I need. I've got everything I need. I've got my food. I've got my shelter. I've got all my fundamentals. What shall I do with my money? Let's buy stocks. Let's buy shares, right? Okay. So basically, rich people benefit from this, and this is kind of like quietly happening in the background. You might have seen the stock market just keeps going up and up and up and up and up and up and up, and the people benefiting from that are rich people who have shares. This is the island of Rockall. Rockall is the place where my band claimed in all of our marketing that we played our first ever gig.
Quirky.
It's a tiny island off it's way off to the west of the UK, like out towards Iceland. Let's pretend there's nothing on the island apart from you and me, right?
Okay.
And I have got this super cool rain hat. I've got this rain hat and it's pretty rainy on Rockall, so it's a pretty good thing to have, right?
Yeah.
Now, there's nothing else on the island apart from the two of us and this rain hat. And you have got, let's use American dollars. You've got $200. There's nothing else to buy. How much is the rain hat worth?
$200.
It's worth $200. Yeah. Why would I sell it for anything less, right? It's worth $200. Now what's going to happen is you go away and you're like, oh, I need more money, right? There's now $400. How much is the hat worth?
But I thought I had the hat.
No, you haven't bought it yet. I refuse to sell it for $200.
Oh, okay. £600.
Hannah.
I was like able to get off the island to go make some buck, then come back. Okay, £400, obviously, because that's what I've got at the moment.
We're confusingly in American dollars. Okay, so it's worth $400 now. So it was worth 200, but as soon as you created another 200, it's now worth 400.
Yes.
Right? Because this is the only thing worth owning on the island. So as soon as there's $400 on the island, it's now worth $400. The price of the hat is going up because the value of money is going down because you're creating more money. Okay, so this is called inflation. So the amount of money increases, but the amount of stuff worth owning stays the same. And so ultimately the price of stuff just goes up and up and up. And what it means for people holding money is that your money just gradually becomes less and less worth something. Right? Now, inflation is happening all the time by like 3% a year or something like that. And this is kind of like the standard-ish rate that things change at the moment. But why is quantitative easing not causing more inflation? It's one of the strangest and most important things about what's going on in the reality of the world at the moment. JDRL18 has got the right answer. It's not getting spent. All of the extra money in the system is going to all the rich people who hold stocks. And what do they do with their money? They don't need extra food. They've already got the food they need. They don't need extra cars. They've already got the cars they need. They don't need most of the normal things. And so they don't spend it into the economy. And so the economy almost doesn't notice that there's this vast amount of money being created in the world of rich people. And so it doesn't inflate the system. And it's very weird. It's called inflationary pressure. It's like this tidal wave of inflation waiting to happen. So if there was a situation where suddenly all the rich people started buying loads of normal things, like going to the supermarket and being like, right, I'm going to have 100 loaves of bread today, and I'll have 5,000 eggs. And suddenly it would drive the price sky high because there isn't actually that much supply of it. And suddenly there's loads of money able to buy it. Our currency doesn't inflates because people aren't spending money into the system. All the rich people just hold on to their money and they just keep putting the money back into stocks. And eventually there must come a point where either all of that money will suddenly create loads of inflation, or there'll just be this continuing separation between rich people and everyone else. And probably the latter will happen on the current path that we're on. Cryptocurrencies, you can't do this with, right? You don't have a central bank that can just create loads of cryptocurrencies out of nowhere. It's who controls the records of where the cryptocurrencies come from?
Everyone.
And where do they come from? They come from finding solutions to a problem. And everyone knows who owns which solution because everyone's got an ongoing record of it. You can't have a central bank that's like, right, we're just going to create 5 billion Bitcoins.
Yes.
It can't happen because the records are already there. The problem was set right at the beginning of the game. And no one can just create money out of nowhere. So you can't create this mad inflation. It's a totally different way of running money. It's like money is being based on gold again. You can't just create gold out of thin air. You can't just create Bitcoins out of thin air. So this has a lot of potential positives and a lot of potential negatives because who holds all the Bitcoins? It's mainly just a load of rich people again, isn't it? So if the future became Bitcoin, we'd be taking power away from central banks. We'd be giving power to all the people who just happened to mine Bitcoin early on in the age of Bitcoin. So in that sense, it would create loads of its own problems. So you might have seen in the news people talking about how the whole Bitcoin network takes up the equivalent amount of energy of like a small city.
Yes, because the miners.
Which is true because there's all the mining, there's all the processing of transactions, there's a crazy amount of energy being used. But if you compare that to the amount of energy that is used by the entire banking sector in like looking after all of money, A system that's constantly inflating and one that's based on debt is one that means that debt constantly has to be paid off. And
Right.
if people all over the world are constantly in debt and have to pay it off, then people are forced to make the kind of decisions that people in debt make, i.e., if they have a few trees and they need to chop them down to make the money back, they'll chop them down.
Yeah.
If they're a country in debt and they have an oil field that they were avoiding using because they didn't want to ruin the environment, they now have to use the oil fields. They have to mine the oil because they've got debts to pay off.
Right.
So debt-based system is hugely problematic for the environment in many other ways. So when people look at Bitcoin and they're like, oh no, that's a big environmental problem, maybe a non-debt-based system could actually solve a lot of environmental problems as well. None of this is financial advice, by the way. We have to say that. I always forget to say that. But Bitcoin could well be a very important part of the future of money.
Part of the future of money. Part of.
We'll see.